Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, and today it is Agatha Christie's birthday. She was born on the 15th of September 1890. So happy birthday to the Queen of Crime, and in honour of that I'm going to be showing you my top 10 Agatha Christie books of all time. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I talk about books a lot, and one of my favourite book subjects is the very great Agatha Christie and her 66 detective novels and many short stories that she wrote. You may have seen my video, the Hercule Poirot mystery book tag that I have created. If you haven't watched that yet, I would love you to click on the link over here to go and see that and join in if you would like to. So anyway, in honour of Agatha Christie's birthday, the 15th of September, I thought I would bring you some more Agatha Christie content, and over on Instagram I ran a vote a couple of weeks ago to ask you what content you would like to see. The winning votes were with the top 10 overall Agatha Christie books. I did get some votes for top 10 Poirot and top 10 Marple, so I do plan to do those videos at a later date, and hopefully there will be a bonus video at the end of the week with some slightly different Agatha Christie content. So when coming up with my top 10 Agatha Christie books of all time, there are a few things to bear in mind. One is that I started reading Agatha Christie in 2006, and I finished reading all of Agatha Christie's major novels and short stories this year in January 2021. So I have read them quite slowly over time. I do think that my tastes and my ratings have definitely changed over time. I've started rereading Agatha Christie this year with Christiefest, and I've so far reread A Caribbean Mystery, Peril at End House, and this month's read is Mrs McGinty's Dead. So I'm looking forward to revisiting a lot more Agatha Christie, because there are a lot of books where I'm either no longer sure how I feel about them, or I have a strong feeling about how I feel about them and I want to revisit them and see if I am right. Oh, and I've also reread Why Didn't I Ask Evans. I've discovered since starting to reread them that the vast majority of Agatha Christie books I actually remember very little about the solutions, which is great because I'm getting to read them all over again like new murder mysteries. When I was originally reading these, I really loved the Poirot books, which I still do, and I didn't really like the Miss Marple ones, and sometimes I rated the standalones quite low because they didn't have Poirot in them, and I was enjoying Poirot books so much. I did have a look through in preparation for this video all of my book journals from 2006 to now. Bear in mind that back in 2006 I was literally giving it a rating out of 10 and writing one sentence about the book, so it's quite hard to tell about the first ones that I read what I really thought of them. The thing that really surprised me that I want to mention before getting into the top 10 is my ratings. I've never been very good at rating books. In my book of books I've always kept ratings out of 10, but I have always been very stingy with rating books, so I rarely ever give a 5-star. I pretty much never have given a 10 out of 10. The highest I've ever given an Agatha Christie book, bearing in mind I consider her my favourite author, is a 9 out of 10. I will explain during this top 10 why that 9 out of 10 book is not actually my top favourite Agatha Christie. I do also want to give a couple of honourable mentions to books that I was really shocked at my rankings of them. So, for example, I really thought, and I had actually pulled them out to put them in the top 10, I really thought that I had loved Lord Edgware Dies and The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, one of Agatha Christie's most famous books. Turns out when I first read them I actually gave both of those two 6.5 out of 10. I'm quite ashamed. So it does go to show that you can change your opinion of books over time. but I didn't like to put either in the top 10. With Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I'd actually written in my book journal why I'd given it 6.5 out of 10. I now definitely urgently need to reread it to find out why I did that. I think I was annoyed about a certain aspect of it, but nonetheless it was enough to take it out of my top 10. Also, my absolute 2 top favourite Agatha Christie books of all time, I was so disappointed with myself that I gave them a 7 out of 10 on my first reading. I think what has changed my mind on both of these books, which you'll see in a minute, is that I have since had increased exposure to them through other ways, such as adaptations and stage plays. I think for me, the important thing about a book and how it rates in your mind is how it ages. Books can stay with you and books can not stay with you. So there are some books that I rated really highly that I now don't have that fond memory of, and there are other books that I rated not as highly that have become over time my favourites, even without rereading them. Bizarrely, I gave Taken at the Flood, a book which I don't think I've ever thought about again, 8.5 out of 10, and this was the only Agatha Christie book I gave that rating to. There's one book that I gave a 9 to, which is in this top 10, and the rest of the books I either gave an 8, 7.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 5, and there's actually a 4 in there as well. I did rate this as my second favourite Agatha Christie book. However, I'm not going to show it in my top 10 because I don't really remember it and it hasn't stuck with me. Really, I've gone with my heart, and this is my top 10 Agatha Christie books now. When I've reread them, I fully expect this top 10 to change. Let's get into the top 10. So in at number 10 is the only Marple book that I've allowed onto this top 10 list. Really, it probably should have been The Moving Finger because I gave that an 8 out of 10, but in my mind, this is my favourite Miss Marple book. Controversially, my favourite Miss Marple is probably the book that Miss Marple appears in least. I don't think she appears until over 200 pages have gone, and it is Sleeping Murder. I absolutely love the premise of Sleeping Murder, and I loved some of the things that Agatha Christie does in this book. She famously wrote this during the Second World War and saved it back for being published after she had died. So this was the last Miss Marple. It was published in 1976, but it was written a long time before that. That's in at number 10 on the list. I really enjoy this. It's a bit spooky, and yeah, it's probably my favourite Miss Marple at the moment. In at number 9, this made it into the top 10 after the Roger Ackroyd and Lord Edgware Dies fiasco. I've chosen Cards on the Table. This is definitely a solid Poirot mystery. It's very enjoyable. It's a gripping book featuring a murder that happens in a room full of gathered detectives and criminals. Mr. Shaitana has invited this unlikely group of people around to his place, and he ends up the victim of murder. This is a brilliant example of one of my favourite types of murder mystery, the closed room mystery. We have a pool of only 4 suspects in this one, so it's really, really interesting. In at number 8 is one of my books that I've reread already. Possibly Cards on the Table might beat it, but it's the first standalone on the list. And we have 3 standalones on this list. The rest, apart from number 10, are Poirot's. So we have our first standalone, Why Didn't They Ask Evans? I've talked about this a lot on my channel. It has my favourite title of any Agatha Christie book. I love the premise of this one, and although it's a little bit of a slow burn to begin with, it comes out so good. And the main thing I love about Why Didn't They Ask Evans is the characters, and particularly the character of Frankie, Lady Frances Derwent. I think this is such an underrated Agatha Christie, and I do recommend you give it a try. In at number 7 is Towards Zero. Again, I nearly changed my mind about this because I didn't rate this very highly to begin with. Over time, I've developed a real desire to reread this one. I consider it in my top 10 because it's got a really intriguing and different idea, and it was an exciting book to read. I only have this in a 1940s omnibus that I bought for 20 pence from a library book sale, hence it's not in great condition. And Towards Zero it's a murder mystery that starts from the build up to the murder and counts down to the 0 hour. So it's an interesting one for sure. I am looking forward to rereading that one and checking that it deserves to be in the top 10. In at number 6 is Hercule Poirot's first adventure and Agatha Christie's first book, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I have a huge soft spot for this, and there is another book on the list that links closely to this one. If you're looking for a starting point with Poirot, you can't go far wrong than reading his first mystery first. His partnership with Captain Hastings is brilliant to read, and this is a decent murder mystery. Into the top 5, number 5, The ABC Murders. I love this idea. It is one of the ones I rated highly to begin with as well. It's a fantastic story. So this is story where Poirot and Hastings are on the trail of a serial killer. Alice Asher has been killed in Andover. Someone beginning with B, I've forgotten who, is killed in a town beginning with B, and so on. So the murderer appears to be working their way through the railway guide and killing people with certain initials in certain places. It's a really gripping read, and this is definitely one of my favourite Poirots. In at number 4, I must say, possibly could come higher on another day, is the very first Agatha Christie that I read, Murder on the Orient Express. This is probably Agatha Christie's most famous work. It's been adapted numerous times, and this is one of the few where I definitely know what the solution is, but that doesn't stop me from wanting to reread this one. It's an absolute classic, Christie. And this is the story of a murder on a train that is stranded in a snowdrift. If your only experience of this is the Kenneth Branagh film, I absolutely urge you to go out and read this book, because it's not like that film. Poirot isn't an action hero like Kenneth Branagh is trying to make him be in that film. This book is so much cleverer and so much more worth your time. People say this isn't the ideal Agatha Christie book to read first, but I read it first and it set me off on a month-long binge of reading nothing but Agatha Christie pretty much. I've never looked back from that day in February 2006. This created a lifelong love of Poirot. It's always going to be very high in my top 5. Next we have, in at number 3, this is actually the book that I rated the most highly on my first read, and it's Poirot's final case, Curtain, Poirot's last case. I had saved this to read after I'd read everything else featuring Hercule Poirot. Saving it for last was definitely the right move. I cried a lot. This was, for me, saying goodbye to a detective I had been enjoying for, at that time, about 9 years. And I was devastated at the end of this, saying goodbye to my favourite character, as well as being Poirot's swan song. This has a really intriguing case, and Agatha Christie at her finest and most playful. Again, this was written during the war. It was published just before Agatha Christie's own death. It's my advice that you read this last of the Poirot books, because it just makes sense to read it last. If you haven't read it already, it's a beautiful book, but you will appreciate it more the more Poirot that you have read. So maybe save it. We're on to the final 2, and one of these I love for its genius, and it is probably Agatha Christie's best, and the other I love for just the fact that I love it. Both of these books, very strangely, I gave only 7 out of 10 to when I originally rated them. Since changed my mind about both of them. In at number 2 is Agatha Christie's most famous standalone book, And Then There Were None. This is widely considered to be Agatha Christie's greatest work. It counts down 10 strangers on an island, cut off from the mainland, so the perfect setting, and the 10 people on the island start to be killed. And as you can tell from the title, And Then There Were None, the killing does not stop. So this is a very intriguing mystery. It's Agatha Christie at her most clever, and I absolutely love this one. I think my opinion of it has improved over the years because I've been to see a play of this, which reminded me how great it was. I may have reread it, but I can't be quite sure. And yeah, this is just an amazing book. Had a brilliant adaptation starring Aidan Turner. There was quite a lot of famous actors in it. I think that's probably the best adaptation I've seen of an Agatha Christie. So all of those things have added to my love of this book over the years. Absolutely cannot wait to reread this again. Oh, I've also played a computer game of this on the Nintendo Wii, but I couldn't get very far with it because it kept not letting me find the clues, so I'm not very good at computer games. A very close second for And Then There Were None. And finally, my top favourite book. If you've been tuned into my channel at all before, I've talked about this book a lot, and it's my top favourite, Five Little Pigs. I've been to see Five Little Pigs as a play called Go Back for Murder. I just love this. It's my favourite of all the Hercule Poirot solves a cold case type of ones. There are several books in which Poirot goes back to solve a crime that's happened a long time ago, and in this one Caroline Crail has been accused of killing her husband Amyas, and she has actually been put away for that murder and has since died. And Poirot's client is Caroline's daughter, who wants to find out the truth and wants to prove her mother innocent. Poirot steps up to the case, it goes to the scene of the crime, and years later interviews the Five Little Pigs, the 5 people who were involved. Has a very small suspect pool, as I love in Agatha Christie's and murder mysteries in general. Has a fabulous setting. I love the characters in this one. I just think this is such a brilliant book, and so much more underrated than some of the other Agatha Christie's we've spoken about on this list. So my personal favourite Agatha Christie book at the moment is Five Little Pigs. Perhaps when I've done a reread of everything, this top 10 will change completely, but I don't know. I can't see anything knocking Five Little Pigs off the top spot. I have enjoyed Agatha Christie so much over the years, and there are so many of her books that I just think are absolutely brilliant mysteries. It was so hard to choose a top 10. I have no idea how people manage to do ranking videos of the entirety of Agatha Christie. Maybe I could do one in the future. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see that, but it will take me a lot of time and a lot of racking my brains, because there were at least 3 versions of this top 10 before this video was even made. I think as it's Agatha Christie's birthday, I'm going to go and get on with reading the autobiography of Agatha Christie, and September's always a month where I like to read some Agatha Christie in her honour. Let me know in the comments down below if you'll be doing anything to celebrate Agatha Christie. Perhaps you could read one of her books if you haven't already, pick up another one if you have. Yeah, let me know in the comments down below which Agatha Christie would you like to read next, and which books would feature in your top 10 or top 5. I would love to hear from you. So happy birthday to Agatha Christie. I hope you'll give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope to see you again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.